Introduction to Poetry is a poem by Billy Collins in which the speaker expresses their thoughts on how different people approach poetry. The plentiful metaphors scattered all throughout the poem help the speaker distinguish between two distinct approaches that poem readers may have: an inquisitive, soft approach, and a violent, torturous one at the turn. The speaker is explaining that the often misguided approach that people have to poetry can oftentimes be counterproductive. In the beginning of the poem, the speaker expresses that poetry should be approached with a soft sense of wonder. The speaker uses metaphors, which will be discussed later, to evoke a sense of exploration and discovery. The beginning encourages readers to read poetry as if it was art, something to appreciate. The end of the poem, in contrast, is the speaker's satire of how most will treat a poem. Instead of looking into the true meaning of the poem and appreciating it for how it is, most try to beat a meaning out of the poem itself. The violent, destructive metaphors at the turn represent the approach of seeking a clear, single track of meaning of the poem through brute force.
The line, "press an ear against its hive," is a metaphor that illustrates a poem as a softly buzzing beehive. In the context of Introduction to Poetry, the speaker is encouraging poem readers to closely and delicately listen to the rhythm and meaning of the poem, like how one would gently listen to the low hum of a beehive. You can't capture or control a beehive. It is alive and fluctuating, just like the intricacy of a poem. Watch him probe his way out. The mouse represents the readers, curious, exploratory, and cautious. When placed in the poem, readers should carefully examine the contents. Rather than having a rigid path to follow, they have the freedom to discover and closely feel around the words. Instead of attempting to budge the meaning out of a poem by following direct instructions, the readers should patiently investigate it with no restraints. In the line, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch, poems are portrayed as an open space, which anyone may walk into. When suggesting to feel the walls for a light switch, Collins illustrates the process of exploring a poem. Before immediately turning the light on, readers must find the switch. It may be dark at first or difficult to understand, but once you feel around and delve into the poem, you can eventually turn the light on or interpret it. Readers shouldn't rush to find an immediate solution. Rather, they should calmly traverse the subtleties and complexities of it. The metaphor, "I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore," expresses how readers should attempt to approach the poem as a spirited pastime. Water skiing is a fun and carefree activity, where you swiftly skim across the surface of the sea, instead of other water sports that involve diving deep into the ocean. Skimming over the surface of the water allows readers to take a lighthearted approach to the poems, rather than stressing over how to force the meaning out of them. When Collins tells the readers to wave at the author's name on the shore, he is asking them to distantly acknowledge the author. He uses this metaphor to emphasize the importance of not spiraling over finding what is said to be the correct meaning. Readers should, instead, glide over the words and interpret it themselves.
In conclusion, the metaphors in Introduction to Poetry by Billy Collins are used to draw a drastic contrast between the curious, playful approach to reading poetry that the beginning of the poem has and the violent, forceful approach at the end. These vivid metaphors used in the beginning, like pressing an ear to its hive or water skiing across its surface, emphasize the speaker's idea that poetry is meant to be experienced and interpreted by yourself and by your own experiences. It's not supposed to be analyzed with one single angle. The violent metaphors at the turn, instead, warn against trying to force out one meaning, and instead show that the speaker is trying to say that it's up to the reader to interpret it themselves. In the end, Collins is trying to stress the importance of recognizing that a poem is meant to be beautiful and flow by itself, not be forced.